It doesn't happen all at once. There's no loud shatter, no dramatic ending, just a quiet shift in the air, a tiny fracture so subtle, no one sees it but you. You're sitting in a small room, maybe at the kitchen table or the edge of your bed, and something inside you starts rearranging itself. You notice the tension first, the way voices rise before dinner, the way silence stretches after arguments. You begin to measure safety not by love, but by the absence of noise. And then, without realizing it, you start adapting. You watch the adults, their eyes heavy, their hands tired, their words sharp or slow or missing entirely, and something ancient awakens in your small body. If I can stay quiet enough, good enough, helpful enough, maybe things won't fall apart. That's the first trade you make with life. You give up your freedom for stability. You give up your playfulness for peace. From that day on, you're not just a child anymore. You become the emotional glue, the invisible thread holding a broken home together. You notice when mum's eyes gloss over, when dad's voice shakes, when the air thickens before the storm. You become fluent in moods. You learn to decode danger faster than language. You become a silent meteorologist, forecasting emotions, predicting when love might vanish. People call that awareness a gift. They say you're wise beyond your years, emotionally intelligent, mature. But no one tells you that wisdom born from survival is a kind of wound. Because you can't unsee pain once you've seen it up close. You can't unknow the sound of a slammed door that tells you you're not safe. You can't unknow the feeling of being 7 and realizing that comfort isn't coming not from the people who should give it. So, you start manufacturing safety on your own. You become the helper, the peacekeeper, the one who listens, who fixes, who knows how to make everyone feel okay except yourself. And the world rewards you for it. Teachers call you responsible, friends call you dependable, adults say, "You're so mature for your age." But what they're really saying without realizing it is, "Thank you for abandoning your childhood to make everyone else comfortable." That's how parentification begins quietly, invisibly, behind closed doors and beneath smiles. It's when the roles reverse and the child becomes the caretaker. When you start soothing your mother's tears instead of crying your own. When you hide your needs because theirs are always louder. When you feel guilty for wanting anything at all. At first, it feels noble. You think you're helping. You think you're keeping the family together. But inside, you're slowly disappearing. Your laughter becomes quieter. Your curiosity fades into caution. Your sense of self dissolves into everyone else's needs. You become whoever they need you to be, the calm one, the strong one, the responsible one. And while everyone around you feels better because of it, you start to feel nothing at all. That's the paradox of growing up too fast. You learn how to care for others, but forget how to care for yourself. You master emotional language but lose your own voice. You become someone who saves everyone except the one person who needed saving most, you. And yet, even in that disappearance, there's a strange kind of hope. Because the child who learned to read danger was also learning something else, resilience, adaptability, empathy. But those gifts were born in the wrong soil. They grew out of pain instead of play. The tragedy is not that you became strong, it's that you had no choice. Because when adults collapse, children improvise. And your improvisation became your identity. Now, years later, you may still find yourself playing that same role, even when the danger is gone. You're still scanning rooms for tension, still softening your voice to keep others calm, still saying, "It's fine" when it's not. That's what survival does. It trains the body to stay alert long after the threat is over. It teaches you that love is something you earn by being useful. It convinces you that your worth depends on how well you hold others together. But that's not love, that's conditioning. And someday, if you're lucky, you'll feel it, that quiet exhaustion in your chest that whispers, "I can't keep being everyone's anchor if I'm drowning." That moment, that whisper, is the beginning of your return. Because healing begins the same way childhood ended, quietly, not in explosions or breakdowns, but in small realizations, in the sudden awareness that you're still performing safety for people who no longer control your world. You start noticing how heavy it is to always be the strong one. You start wondering what it would feel like to be soft. You start asking questions like, what if I didn't have to hold everything together anymore? And those questions, simple, dangerous, holy, become the doorway back to yourself. Because the truth is, you never stop being that child. They've been waiting buried under decades of responsibility for you to finally turn around and say, you don't have to do this alone anymore. And when you do, when you finally reach for that forgotten part of you with tenderness, instead of shame, you'll realize something sacred. You never lost your childhood. It's been waiting for you to come home. By the time most children are learning to dream, you were learning to detect danger. Before your mind could understand what was wrong, your body had already adapted to survive it. You didn't call it trauma back then. You called it being careful, being good, being strong. But underneath those words was a quiet engineering, a full nervous system redesign. Because when you grow up in chaos, your body becomes the architecture of control. Your brain learns that safety isn't something you feel, it's something you manage. Every cell in you memorizes the rule: don't relax, stay alert. And over time, vigilance becomes identity. That's what psychologists call hypervigilance. A constant, invisible scanning of the environment for threat. But it's more than just a behavior. It's a full-body religion. You pray to the god of preparedness. You worship at the altar of tension. You learn to sacrifice peace for the illusion of stability. Even when the storm is over, you keep your armor on, because safety feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar feels dangerous. It's not logic, it's wiring. When you live in survival long enough, stillness doesn't register as calm, it registers as exposure. Your nervous system, once trained for chaos, mistakes peace for a trap. So you stay busy, you overthink, you anticipate every possible outcome until anxiety feels like intuition. You convince yourself you're just being responsible. But deep down, responsibility is the only identity that ever earned you love. You don't realize it, but your childhood was a boot camp. You learned emotional triage. You became fluent in other people's pain. You learned to comfort without being comforted. To sense tension before it erupted. To manage every room so it didn't destroy you. You learned empathy as a defense mechanism. And now, it's the thing everyone admires most about you. But here's the hidden cost. When you spend your entire childhood studying danger, you lose the ability to feel safe even when you are. Your mind becomes a smoke detector that never stops beeping. Your body stays flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, even when the house is quiet. You might think you've outgrown your past, but your nervous system disagrees. It still reacts to raised voices the way it once did to real threats. It still tenses up when someone's angry, even if they're not angry at you. You find yourself apologizing for existing, a reflex built from years of tiptoeing around fragile adults. You avoid confrontation because it reminds you of those nights when conflict meant danger. You over-explain because silence once meant abandonment. You overperform because peace used to depend on your perfection. And the saddest part? The world sees your competence and calls it confidence. They see your vigilance and call it awareness. They see your exhaustion and call it discipline. But you know the truth. You're not confident, you're alert. You're not disciplined, you're afraid. You're not calm, you're dissociating. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped existing as a person and started functioning as a system. A perfectly calibrated machine built to anticipate, fix, prevent, soothe, and protect. That's what survival does. It rewires your humanity into strategy. But beneath that machinery, the child you once were is still there. And that child doesn't care about coping mechanisms. They just want to be held. They want to believe that the world isn't something to manage. It's something to rest in. Yet rest feels like danger when your body has only ever known chaos. That's why, as an adult, you struggle to relax. You feel restless during quiet moments. You seek out drama or distraction without realizing why, because stillness feels like waiting for the next hit. So you fill your life with noise, work, caretaking, achievement, chaos in prettier clothes. You call it ambition, but it's really avoidance. Avoidance of the silence that might reveal how lonely you still are. You see, survival isn't just something you lived through. It became the blueprint for how you relate to everything, to love, to work, to yourself. You learn to measure safety by control and love by how much you can give before you break. And now, even the kindest people can make you nervous because you don't trust calm. Calm feels like the moment before everything falls apart. So, you stay ready, always ready. You plan your sentences before you speak. You manage emotions that aren't even yours. You live as both the firefighter and the fire. And the cruel irony, no one notices. Because you make it look effortless. You smile, you function, you achieve. You are the blueprint of reliability. But beneath that composure, your body is tired. Tired of translating fear into competence. Tired of turning pain into empathy. Tired of surviving days that are no longer dangerous. That's the invisible exhaustion of the hypervigilant heart. It's not laziness, it's not burnout. It's your nervous system begging for a kind of safety it's never known. And maybe, for the first time, you're starting to hear it. That small, trembling voice inside you saying, I don't want to be strong all the time. I just want to feel safe. That's not weakness. That's truth. That's the sound of survival loosening its grip. That's the first brick crumbling in the architecture of fear. And as that structure begins to fall, something extraordinary happens. For the first time, you start wondering what it would be like, not to survive, but to live. You grow up, but the survival script stays. It follows you like an invisible rhythm, setting the pace of your life. On the outside, you look stable, even impressive. You have achievements, responsibilities, maybe even success. But inside, you're still that small child, scanning the room, waiting for permission to breathe. You've built your life on a foundation called functioning. You hold it all together, no matter what. You show up when you're exhausted. You comfort others while quietly falling apart. You carry the unspoken belief that if you stop, even for a moment, everything will collapse. And people love you for it. They admire your resilience, your work ethic, your calm under pressure. They say things like, "You're so strong," and you nod politely, but deep down, you know strength has never been a choice, it's been a prison. Because when being strong becomes your identity, you lose the right to be human. You forget how to ask for help. You feel guilty for resting. You interpret kindness as suspicion. You confuse exhaustion with accomplishment. You've built a beautiful cage, one made of competence and control, and everyone applauds you for living in it. This is the cost of strength. It's not just fatigue, it's disconnection. It's learning to hold everyone, but never being held. It's becoming so self-reliant that intimacy feels like intrusion. It's standing in a crowded room surrounded by people who adore you, and feeling completely unseen. Because the world doesn't notice the pain of the capable. No one asks how the strong are doing. They assume you're fine because you make fine look effortless. But inside, your body keeps score. It knows the difference between calm and suppression. It knows the weight of every swallowed word, every unspoken need, and eventually, it starts to speak for you. through anxiety, through burnout, through a quiet sadness that doesn't go away. You might not even recognize it as sadness. You might call it numbness, boredom, or lack of motivation. But underneath all that is grief. Grief for the years you spent performing stability instead of living it. You see it in your relationships too. You're drawn to people who need fixing, because being useful feels like home. You overextend, overgive, overexplain, until love starts to feel like labor. And when someone finally tries to care for you, you flinch. You don't know what to do with softness. You don't know how to receive without earning it. You mistake love for danger, because love once meant responsibility. So you keep building careers, goals, reputations, hoping that if you achieve enough, maybe peace will find you. But peace doesn't live in performance. It lives in permission, the permission to stop, to rest, to be seen without doing. That's what no one tells the strong ones. Strength can be a mask for fear. The fear of being useless, the fear of being a burden, the fear that if you're not holding everything up, no one will. You learned that as a child, and you've been living by it ever since. So now, when life finally gives you moments of ease, you feel restless. You create new problems just to have something to fix. You sabotage rest because comfort feels suspicious. You tell yourself you're fine, but fine is the anthem of the emotionally exhausted. Fine means, I can't afford to feel right now. Fine means, if I start crying, I might never stop. And still, you keep going. Because stopping feels like failure, and failure feels like abandonment. But here's the truth. The strength that once saved you is now suffocating you. It's the armor that kept you alive, and now it's keeping you from being alive. There's a moment in every healing journey where you realize that your coping mechanisms aren't you, they're just adaptations. And what once kept you safe is now keeping you stuck. You're not broken. You're just tired of pretending to be invincible. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to want something more than survival. Not control, not perfection, just peace. But peace won't come from doing more. It comes from undoing, from unlearning the idea that love must be earned, that stillness is dangerous, that strength is the only way to deserve belonging. It comes from allowing yourself to fall apart without labeling it failure. From realizing that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's oxygen. And slowly, gently, you begin to understand that you don't have to carry everyone anymore. That maybe, for the first time, it's okay to set the weight down. Maybe you don't have to prove anything. Maybe you don't have to fix anyone. Maybe you don't have to be strong all the time. Because strength that costs your softness isn't strength, it's survival. And you've survived long enough. There comes a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when the noise begins to fade. No applause, no collapse, just silence. And in that silence, something stirs. Not panic this time, not the old vigilance rising, but something gentler. A question you've avoided your whole life begins to whisper. What if I don't have to live this way anymore? You don't answer right away. Survivors never do. Because rest feels suspicious, and hope feels like a luxury you haven't earned. But the whisper keeps returning, persistent as breath. And slowly you begin to realize that healing isn't a thunderclap. It's the soft practice of listening to yourself again. At first, it feels clumsy. You try to relax, but your mind still rehearses disasters. You try to speak your truth, and your throat closes. You try to rest, and guilt wakes you up. That's okay. You're unlearning decades of alertness. Healing begins when you stop trying to be extraordinary and allow yourself to be human. It's not dramatic. It's painfully ordinary. It's remembering to eat when you're hungry instead of when you've finished helping everyone else. It's saying no and surviving the silence that follows. It's catching yourself before you apologize for crying. This is what reparenting looks like, not perfection, but presence. You become the adult you needed, the one who doesn't demand, doesn't criticize, doesn't disappear. You start to build new rituals of safety, breathing instead of bracing, feeling instead of fixing, staying instead of fleeing. You stop negotiating for rest and start treating it as your birthright. Some days, you'll feel like you're going backward. Old habits will resurface, the urge to over-explain, to overfunction, to make everyone else comfortable before you breathe. But that's not failure. That's the nervous system rewriting itself. Every time you choose softness over self-abandonment, you're building new circuitry. Every gentle decision is a new childhood unfolding inside your adulthood. You start to notice small miracles. The way your shoulders drop when no one needs you. The way laughter sneaks out of you without permission. The way quiet begins to feel like peace instead of punishment. These are not coincidences, they're evidence. Evidence that you're learning to live, not just survive. And then comes forgiveness, not the kind that excuses, but the kind that releases. You stop waiting for apologies from people who may never understand. You stop resenting the child you were for not knowing better. You stop demanding that your pain makes sense. You realize the point was never to rewrite the past. It was to reclaim the present. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means accepting that it did, and deciding that your future will be written in a different language. It's choosing to see your strength not as proof of damage, but as proof of depth. So you sit with your inner child, the one who carried the chaos, who mistook love for labor. You look them in the eyes and say the words that finally unlock the cage. You did your best. You can rest now. And when they believe you, something in your chest loosens. It's not dramatic, it's holy. It's the moment you stop managing your life and start inhabiting it. This is what coming home feels like. Not a destination, but a returning to your body, your breath, your truth. You realize the home you were looking for was never a place or a person. It was the permission to belong to yourself. Now the world looks different. You notice sunlight without calculating the next storm. You let people in, not because you need saving, but because connection finally feels safe. You love without losing yourself. You rest without explanation. The people who once relied on your constant strength may not understand this version of you. They might call you distant, selfish, changed. Let them. Growth always looks like rebellion to those who benefit from your silence. You're not abandoning anyone. You're returning to yourself. And the child who lived inside you, that small, steady guardian, finally exhales. For the first time, they are not watching the door. They are watching the sky. You start to dream again, not of perfection, but of peace. You learn that vulnerability is not a risk, it's a reunion. You learn that boundaries are not walls, they're doors that open inward. You learn that you can be strong and soft, disciplined and playful, whole and healing. The cycle ends where compassion begins. The same compassion you once gave everyone else, you now offer to yourself. You understand that the goal was never to erase the past, only to make peace with the person it created. So when you look in the mirror now, you don't just see the adult who survived. You see the child who kept believing that love was possible, even in the absence of proof. You see someone who carried the weight of generations and still found a way to be gentle. You see someone who's finally allowed to rest. And maybe that's the real definition of healing. Not becoming new, but remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. You never lost your softness. You just buried it for safekeeping. Now, at last, you're digging it back up, handful by trembling handful, and calling it yours again. Welcome home.